Hey, what's up everyone, it's Justin here, and today I've got the quick review for you of the Huawei P9. A smartphone that has been drawing a lot of attention as the camera is a dual sensor setup co-engineered with Leica, which as you may know is a legendary company in the camera industry. Starting out with the specs, the CPU is a Huawei Kirin 955 64-bit octa-core processor that combines a 2.5 GHz and 1.8 GHz setup. You've also got 4 GB of RAM and 3000 mAh internal battery, and the device itself comes in at 5.2 inches. Something that I did find a little bit strange though is at the price point of almost $600, there are certain things about this smartphone that really don't scream flagship. For example, pretty much every smartphone nowadays in that tier can shoot 4K video, but another thing is that this phone does not have a QHD display, and although 1080p is perfectly fine, at this price point you would definitely expect to see it. The hardware of the smartphone is much reminiscent of the Nexus 6P, which was obviously made by Huawei. It is sort of a little brother to that, and it doesn't feel overly large in your hands like I experienced with the 6P. It has a camera bar located on the top, but there isn't actually a prominent bump that sticks out on the P9. The phone itself is available in gold, silver, and gray, and the one I have in front of me is in gray, but I noticed that it had quite a bit of a purple hue to it, and I really wasn't a fan of that. Of course, you can also pick up a D-brand skin like I've done here, and I will be leaving a link to that in the description section below. It is constructed out of metal, and like I've seen with recent Huawei devices, it is very well engineered, nicely designed, it feels great in the hand, and is durable. The phone is rather thin, coming in at 7mm, and it's great that they still packed in a 3000 mAh battery and that the camera does not stick out whatsoever. On the bottom, you're going to find a 3.5mm headphone jack, your speakers, as well as the USB Type-C port for charging and syncing. If you may not have noticed by now, the back also has a fingerprint sensor, and the sensor itself is very fast and responsive as you would expect. But let's talk about the display. At the price point of $600, this does fall into a flagship caliber smartphone. The screen, however, at 5.2 inches is a 1920 by 1080 resolution, and I really like the screen size actually, and wish that they made a Nexus 6P in this size. When I first received the smartphone, I actually thought it was a QHD display and was pretty surprised to find out that it wasn't. Everything is very crisp and sharp, and as a result of that display, it probably saves quite a bit of battery life. That might have been one of the trade-offs in making the smartphone so thin and still being able to pack in a 3000 mAh battery. The colors itself were very well rendered, but do lean towards the saturated and vibrant side. The blacks are also very well represented here, and I have to say I have no complaints about the display at all. Moving on to the software, this is probably the biggest complaint I had about Huawei smartphones. It does run Android 6.0 Marshmallow, but is run by EMUI 4.1, which stands for Emotion UI, which is a pretty horrible name if you ask me. The interface is very flat and simple, but I don't know what it is. It's just something that I don't enjoy, and others I've talked to really don't prefer it either. It lacks an app drawer that you're normally used to, and it does have some pre-installed things that seem pretty useless. I'm not personally a big fan of the icons either, but in terms of just navigating the interface, it is very smooth and fluid as you would expect out of this smartphone. When you slide down the notification tab, it categorizes them in a timeline form, which is one thing I did like, and the settings menu is also very simple and clean as well. All in all, it's just something that I don't prefer, but some of you out there might like it. In the end, I've got to say I'd like this smartphone so much more if it ran stock Android. Perhaps one of the biggest reasons why you'd purchase a smartphone though is for the camera. Huawei had teamed up with Leica to produce this, and I have to say they've done a pretty good job. The phone itself features dual 12-megapixel rear-facing cameras, one that captures colors and the other that captures monochrome. As a result of this, more light and detail is able to be captured through these two different cameras, and I definitely noticed this technology right away in the dynamic range it was able to capture in some images. But let's go ahead and take a look at some samples. The first thing you really notice from the camera is the dynamic range and the sharpness. It's definitely not the sharpest camera I've ever tested out, but it's pretty high up there. But where you really notice the possible advantage of having a dual lens camera is the ability to expose both the highlights and the shadows at the same time. Normally when you're trying to focus in on the skies, the shadows get blown out, but that's definitely not the case here. There's also a specific black and white mode that uses the black and white camera most likely, and it produced a really great result as well. When it came to the low light performance, in a pitch black room, here are the results. You're able to make out all the details, and it is one of the better low light cameras out there, but you do notice on the right there's quite a bit of noise here. When it came to the front facing camera though, what I really noticed was once again the dynamic range. It was able to expose my face and the background at the same time. And I would say behind the Samsung Galaxy S7, this has to be one of the best front facing cameras. Though the photo quality was great, the video was the opposite. I actually checked this clip to see if it was actually in 1080p when I imported it, and it was. You can see that there is just no clarity at all, and I'm not sure if it uses the dual camera setup for video, but it really sucks, and that's especially a huge letdown considering how good the photos were. Moving on to the battery life, the Huawei P9 performed very well. As a 3000 mAh battery and a 1080p display, it is something that you would expect. I was able to get easily over a day in my usage, and Huawei also has a few different ways you can maximize the battery life as well, including the Ultra and Performance mode. The Ultra mode is a lot like what you'd see with Samsung and HTC, making it black and white and only allowing you to access exactly what you would need to. But it's a great feature nonetheless, and something that I love to see on smartphones. Other than that, this has just been my review of the Huawei P9, and I'd gotta give a huge thanks to Dbrand for letting this unit out for me to check out. And just to wrap up, here are some of the things that I like and didn't like about the smartphone. Starting out with the good, the camera is incredible, both the front and rear facing cameras, but one huge bummer is the fact that it does not record 4K video, which doesn't make much sense to me. The hardware and design is also very nice, and the battery life is great as well. When it comes to the bad, it would be the software primarily, but also the price point. Obviously they invested a lot of money in the camera, but the fact that it does not have 4K video recording and a UHD display makes it tough for certain consumers to justify when there is a lot of other choices out there. Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one.